This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. If you do a podcast, you got to get lucky. You got to get lucky to have some guests come on that are really interesting and like to keep coming back, keep staying interesting. And they also have to be liked by everyone. They come on a lot and everyone likes them, and they keep coming on and everyone likes them. On this podcast, Tom Basso, Jerry Parker, and Larry Height, 3 trend-following traders, fit that bill. Today, I would like to share 3 back catalog episodes with Larry Height, the original market wizard, the author of the book, The Rule, going back to 2022, 2020, and 2019. 3 episodes, and if you're not familiar with Larry, this is a great introduction. These are not the only episodes with Larry on my show, but these will bring you into the spirit, his mindset. Without any further delay, let's jump right into my back catalog Mega 3 episode with trend-following pro extraordinaire, Mr. Larry Height. I hope you enjoy. A fun podcast today. Larry Height, one of the best trend-following traders of all time. Originally featured in the book, Market Wizards by Jack Schwager. Featured in my book, Trend Following. Featured in my book, The Little Book of Trading. Featured in my film, Broke. Today, Larry comes on in support of his new book, his first book after all of these years. The Rule, How I Beat the Odds in the Markets and Life, and how you can too. I've had so many conversations with Larry, hours and hours of unreleased recordings. I'm going to have to put those all together into a mega episode. But in the meantime, please enjoy my most recent conversation with Larry Height.
I have listened to all of your podcasts. Not because you're a friend of mine, because I happen to like the subjects. You have really interesting guests. You've gone way beyond trend following. But you've gone and you've broadened it out. That's good.
Do you think sometimes, though, that the style of guests and their thinking, though, does connect to trend following sometimes, that they're just good thinkers?
Yes. That is true, because most of the people who are good at speculation have a very practical way of going about things. Because, you see, there's no magic in trend following. What it does to you is kind of magic, but it's not like Catholicism, where some magic is going to happen to you just because you accept Christ. No, trend following says these are the facts. These are the way that people are voting. I mean, the best thing I ever read about trend following was your article on Jeff Bezos.
We talked about that a lot. Why don't you refresh the audience? It was a Jeff Bezos article. People can find it. It was a guy that had collected all of Bezos's newsletters or his shareholder letters that went out, and then I did a little bit of a podcast on it, and you really liked it. But it was basically trend following 101, wasn't it?
Yes, but one of the problems is there's a group of people, mostly academics, that reject anything that's simple. It's because their job to make themselves more is to be a priestly class.
A priestly class.
Yeah, Yes. I don't know what religion you were brought up in.
Yeah, I mean, look, when you said Catholic, though, you could be picking on any religion. Your point is just the faith thing, the religion thing, and you're saying that mentality doesn't work with your line of work.
Yeah, because I'm not going to get what I want by praying. I'm going to get what I need by examining the facts and living with it. I mean, a lot of people do not like trend following, Michael. They just don't like it. And they don't like it because it's accessible to anybody. I'm living proof that you can get very rich doing some very simple things.
I tell you what, before we dive in too much, let me just start with the opening question, the opening thought for this conversation. You are now a first-time author. How does it feel?
A big responsibility, and I have to becoming an author is an enormous responsibility.
In what way? Tell me.
Because I have to explain what we're doing. It's not just about making money. I have to explain to people how this works because I wrote a book.
I saw the galleys and the hardcover is on its way to me, but I saw a picture of the hardcover. It looks really nice.
Yes, they did a very good job. But it goes back to your trailers. Trend following really is an answer in all kinds of markets. It's the absolute truth.
You mean writing a book too? Whatever.
Yeah, writing a book was harder because I had to learn to speak well, and I had to articulate a very simple but very robust method. It's very hard for people to believe that.
They want bells and whistles and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, they want computers, I started my trend following, and most of the people that we know, like Dunn, myself, we did it on paper. John Henry, I used to do it the same way.
A Lotus 1, 2, 3 spreadsheet.
Yes, basically. So I had a friend of mine, very high guy, came from Bell Labs. He said, Larry, this can't possibly work. He said, look, how much is a computer? $3,000, $4,000? If you could do this with a computer, anybody can do it. I said, yeah, turns out it does work.
But hold on. When you say anyone can do it, though, that's kind of why you wrote the book. I mean, it's the psychology, it's the philosophy, it's the inside Larry Height that stuck with it. So when you say anyone can do it, as long as they stick with it like you.
Yeah, look, the truth is, if you go look on late night TV, late night television would tell you that the majority of people are fat in America. And there's a big industry getting people skinny. Now you think about it. I mean, how hard could it be not to eat? That's the deal. Now, I happen to have problems with it. But the point is, we have a lot more computers, but we're not very far from David Ricardo.
You know what? That's a great place to jump into. As the audience may or may not be aware of, the title of your first book is called The Rule. I happen to have had the good fortune to be on the phone with you when you named it The Rule. I don't want to go into all the other titles that were discussed, but you seem to be a little bit, frustrated's maybe not the right word, but you were kind of weird going round and round. Everyone was giving input to you about titles, and you were on the phone with me and you just said, The Rule. That's it. And what is The Rule? As you mentioned, David Ricardo.
It's what David Ricardo said, 400 years ago. Cut your losses and let your winners run. In fact, what you really should do, if you want to you get wealthy if you do that. But you'll get really rich is after you cut your losses, you take that remaining money to the winners.
Clarify that, Larry. You kind of dropped out for a second.
Okay. You're going to cut your losses. Anybody can do this. Take 10, of anything that's trading on an exchange, any kind of exchange, doesn't matter. So you have 10 of these things. 5 of them, they hit their stops, which is the safety. You have to do that, do this correctly. You have to cut your losses. But what I have found, you really get richer when you take those losses and put them back into the winners. And I'm taking about randomly taking 10 things.
Well, so what you're saying is the money that becomes those losses, you can't get emotionally attached to it. Just because it was a loss, you have to be ready to get back and play again.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's true. Because you know something about it. You had a guest on. He said he buys new hoods. Well, I tested that for years, and it really works. Instead of big magic thing, look, at the end of 52 weeks, there's a new high. That new high, that told you something. That in 1 year, this particular futures contract or stock have gotten higher than it ever got before. All you got to do is jump on it with a stop, and you get rich. And anybody got as bad grades as I did. Right? I had learning disabilities. I had a lot of other problems. But I could take this and apply it, and I've got close to $100 million.
Let's put a pin in that for a second, and let's stay at the title, The Rule, for a second. And just to be clear, so everyone understands that the David Ricardo original mantra of, never refuse an option when you get it, cut short your losses, let your profits run on. That 1700s wisdom, I think, from the economist David Ricardo out of London, that 1700s wisdom was why you said, let's call your first book The Rule, because that's the rule.
Yes, exactly.
It's obvious, and you're pretty much you're kind of an interesting guy in the sense that you say things and there's a lot of depth behind it. But as you pointed out so far in this conversation, it's simple sounding. So what was your process for coming up with the 2-word title, The Rule? What popped into your mind? How did that happen? Was it literally just me and you bantering and you just said The Rule and that's it?
Something like that. It worked. If you're a poor kid, I don't mean poverty, but I mean, you're a kid. You're like 90% of the people you have on your show are college graduates. So they didn't come, the many panic. But most of the trend followers that stuck to trend following have become wealthy people. But if you compare it to the population, that's an astounding thing.
Let's talk about the reason why, though. I mean, everyone sees the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. I mean, that's easy to see. I mean, you mentioned it already. You said, okay, you've had a long career and you've hit some milestones on the net worth meter that look pretty good to the average guy who's not yet hit it. What's the ground level? If you had to take it back to when you were 10 years old, 12 years old, a teenager, what were those things that you were putting in motion? The Larry Hite process back when you were a teenager, what were some of those things that you were putting into motion that became the foundation for Larry Hite, the adult, making trading decisions? Because I know the way that you are today was set in motion when you were a young person.
Yes, because I had a goal. And because I had a goal, I found a simple way to do it. And I could test it. If I didn't have a computer, I could go back and look at the numbers. So here you have this thing, and there are the results. You take a idea of having to stop buying the breakout, and you can test it. You can go to the library and you go back 20, 50 years. So it was testable. And that was a big thing. It wasn't a mystery what you do. The mystery is that it makes you so rich. But in reality, what you have to do, it's kind of like if you don't eat, you don't get fat. Now, we have a whole diet regimen that people sell all the time. But what you got to do is not eat. You want to speculate, you have to cut your losses because you don't know how big the losses are.
Hey, let me keep you at that younger Larry for a second and tell me how much psychologically, I mean, I get these, maybe you're going to give me another just straightforward answer. That's fine. But you were an underdog who was not a quitter. You know, you were an underdog who kind of said, okay, you know, I've got these disadvantages. So what? And you just kept plowing ahead.
What choice do you have? If you're like me, you're dyslexic, you're blind in one eye, partially blind in the other eye, and your family says you got to be successful. You have to find a way. You don't have a choice. People who quit have a luxury. If you're poor enough, and I don't mean starving, I mean like lower middle class, like 99% of the people, and you want to achieve something, this is the way you can do it. And I understood that this is doable. The math in the planetary system is not complicated. You want to know if the market's going up and down? Go look at an average. It's really that simple. So if you're a kid and you really get wealthy, you're going to look for something that you can do that's doable by you.
Larry, what do you say to people? I mean, some markets obviously require some capital. You can't go in broke. Put aside the markets. My question here is not only market related, but what do you say to people where they say, you know, I really don't have the money to start the venture. I really don't have the money to be the next entrepreneur. I need money first. I need money. I hear this a lot. What comes to mind when you hear that, when people are saying that in order for them to take action, they must have what they imagine is some certain amount of capital that's going to equal success?
The truth is, you'll get the money you need just because your need is big enough. So you're going to show people how this works. You have your tests. For years, I only walked around with the tests, and you could see that this is what you do. You know, I could put it, what do you do if you don't do that?
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going, is because I think ultimately if someone says, I can't do something in my life, whatever that something is, if I can't do something without the money, they're pretty much saying, I quit before they ever start.
Yeah, and you can get 5 friends to chip in. Literally, I started this idea of, you know, if I take 10% of the profits and I got people to put in the other 90%, and I'm going to, by charging 20% of the profits, I'm going to be getting 30% of the profits. But I had to get up enough money to be able to get the advantage of going across the border.
You're well known for pulling together this like first $1 billion fund back in the day. Now, for you to do that, you must have had a very good way with people. People trusted you. They liked your ambition. They liked your drive. But what could be something that you could explain to other people when they are looking to perhaps either to friends or other associates, if they're looking to pull capital together for their venture, whatever that venture might be, trading, new startup, whatever, what is a piece of advice that you could give to the audience about dealing with people and presenting yourself? Like, how did you do it?
I found that I could build a model and I could show people the results of the model. And that was important.
What did you do personally, though? I mean, what was the way that you, was it just, I mean, look, like everyone can hear you right now. They can hear the Larry personality. Was it just that you're the same guy in this conversation that you were showing the model and that was it?
Yes. because I believed in the numbers. I could see how this could work. I don't know why certain people see trend following works. They just get it. They get it. The first time I saw it, I could just see mathematically how this hung together.
What was your first thought to yourself, though, when you saw that it just hangs together? What did you feel to yourself when you had that aha moment?
I said, I have a way to get rich. And I didn't know how rich I'd get. There were like about 6 of us who were into trend following. I saw it mathematically in my head. I did thousands of using the prices that I got out of the library and stuff, and saw that it worked. By the way, there is nothing wrong with work. Even if you're doing hard scrabble, taking the stuff out of the newspapers, you put it together and you test it. And that's where you get confidence in what you're doing.
It's funny that you're talking about the hard scrabble work, because as you talk about in your book, you took all kinds of entrepreneurial jobs. I think there was one with kind of like redoing doors or something. I mean, you know, we're talking about big money right now, and we're talking about trend following trading. But for you to get your start, you didn't have an ego in it. You were doing whatever you had to do to get there.
Exactly. Because I had to get there.
Why did you have to get there, Larry? Why?
Because my father would not have taken any excuse.
Did you like him at the time for that, or was it only over time you appreciated that attitude?
No, I loved him. Even though he couldn't do it, he said, you're going to do it. And I don't know how you're going to do it, but you're going to do it. And so not only did I take him, I supported him, my grandmother, grandfather, some cousins. I did for the family what I could do. And that's what was my job. I was raised to do that.
Now, does it ever strike you when you go down this entrepreneurial path for decades, and you're basically a self-made guy, and you hear maybe somebody comes on the media or the news and they start talking about evil speculators? You, Larry Height, are an evil speculator, right?
No, I'm a logical person. If that's evil, I don't pray what I do trade. I stick to a method. I've tested my method. So I don't care what they think. I care, am I making money at this? Because that's my job. I had my mother, my father, my grandparents. I had people to support. So I had to do this. It's not a question that I wanted to do it. Well, it turns out I liked it. You can make money without physical labor.
That's tough for a lot of people to accept, though. It's because unless you're exposed to it, unless a Larry Height tells you, hey, by the way, you can use your mind to make money while you sleep, people from the physical labor side of the equation often don't hear somebody tell them that. You're telling them that now in your book, but a lot of people don't hear that.
I saw proof of it. I did thousands of simulations by hand. And I saw that I could work. My boss, who was not bad at it, but he never took it to where it should have gone, he always changed the system. He was always fiddling with it. But it really wasn't bad because he's always cutting his losses and going into the next winners. And that was the secret sauce. The great thing about trend following is your losses are gone. When you make the choice to get out of your losers, then you've opened up a Pandora's box of good stuff. Because you're going to have, if you start off with 10 positions, you're going to have like 5 really good positions that you've added to. And you make money doing that.
But Larry, if I go on Twitter right now, I can find some of the most well-known Wall Street quote professionals, and they all have an opinion about what's going to happen, and they tie their underwear in knots to be right. They have to be right. They want their audience to feel them being right. And you're telling me, losses, if you could take the losses, then you're okay. You're sitting here telling the audience loud and clear, if you're trying to be right, it's going to fail.
Correct. I have one eye that doesn't work that well. I'm dyslexic in my good eye. So I had to find a way to use the tools that were open to me. And by the way, that happened. I don't know anybody except one partner I had. And he was a very, very smart guy. He had all kinds of scholarships and all, but he could not take the pressure of losing. I've been losing my entire life. The last time you were talking on the radio, and you were talking about trash talking, and that's what you did as a catcher. You trash talked the batters. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and just to refresh on that, I was a young kid. I was maybe like 17. I remember trash talking a left-handed batter who was probably 6'3", 225 pounds, and I was probably 6 foot, 170 pounds, but I talked a lot of what. And I remember sitting there telling him exactly where the pitch was going to come, and you can't hit it. Your mother's is out there in the audience laughing at you, and I probably had a lot of F-bombs in there as well, and he just wanted to kill me, but, he struck out.
Right. And it didn't bother you.
It bothered me or bothered him?
It bothered him, but look, you were going to bat. Professional baseball player. What's a really good batting average?
300.
Okay, so that means 70% of the time, they're wrong.
And you're basically saying that guy that I was trash talking should have never been so emotional, because you got to know from the beginning, 70% of the time, I mean, we're talking Moneyball 101 here, 70% of the time you're going home back to the dugout. And if you watch the professional hitters, most of the time they strike out and walk casually back to the dugout. And most of the time they don't have that emotional attachment at that high level, major league level.
Yeah, because that's the game. This is like, I did some boxing. I'm not particularly good at it, but you get into a boxing ring, it should be no surprise that the other guy wants to punch you in the nose. That's what he's there for.
As you say that, what you're really saying with the trash talking of my example and you talking about, fighting the boxing matches, you're really pointing out that, like, look, there can be the rules and, but you got to have a stiff constitution here. This is playing for keeps. This is real. This is the real game.
That's why they call it life. Life was never meant to be easy. You have some very good, easy runs, but I mean, baseball is, and I'm not an athlete, but you could see from the batting averages how people do it, what the numbers say. I'm not making up the numbers. How many people are 400 hitters?
Ted Williams was the last one. 1941 or something? Okay.
So the majority of people are under that. The average baseball player. And by the way, the guy that in leagues, he's really good. He's a very good athlete. Otherwise, he wouldn't be there. But at best, he's going to be 350, 400. 400 is not going to really be 400.
We would be amiss also if we didn't point out that one of your old trend-following associates from back in the day, John Henry, who then used his trend-following winnings to buy the Boston Red Sox and then turned the Boston Red Sox into a more of a statistical wonder that went on to win 3 world championships since he has owned the team.
Yeah. And he did that basically living in Florida. He wasn't there for every game. But there is something about trend following and the numbers that tell a story. And that story is true.
Let me take you back to Jeff Bezos, though. I kind of moved you off that, and you had brought it up, and I think it's a really important point from you. And I want to add a quote, and I'll let you run from it, from that article that you were talking about. And Bezos, one thing that he said was, and I think he was actually paraphrasing somebody else, but it was something to the effect of like, look, if you're offered a seat on a rocket ship, don't question the seat or which seat you're sitting in. Just get on.
Right. That's exactly right. Just get on the rocket.
A lot of people want to question it, though, right? They want to talk about why the rocket's going this way and all that other kind of stuff.
You're getting on a rocket to go to where the rocket's going. And it's the only way you're going to get there. So that's your choice. If you don't try in baseball or girls or anything, love, you can have 100% chance if you understand you're a failure and you don't try, you'll always be correct. You always, but if you just try, you will disrupt those statistics.
I'm not trying in this conversation so far to lead people down every line of your book. They're going to have to go check it out. That's, it's very motivational. But I think that's your real point in your book is you are taking all of your life stories to basically show people of a guy who's had ups and downs, but you keep pushing forward, generally up.
Right. I found a very good way to trade securities. It's quite different than I thought it was, but it's making me a lot of money. And I love that. Your commercial for your program, it's really sums up life as I had it, as I know it. You change the probabilities just by going back. And if you just stay home and do nothing, then you don't change anything.
And that's your real message. Your real message is challenging all of us to not just sit there. You're saying of all the disadvantages you had and you keep plugging away, you're humble about it. You're not saying big ego about it. You're just saying, look, here is a different way of thinking about it than perhaps most colleges will ever tell you.
Yeah. Did you just mention colleges?
Yeah.
One of the things that happened, I had this short professor. I was always left off. I always loved problems. So this guy, I went in the summer to make up for accounting class that I had a lot of people in the I counted really hard. So he said, so he goes through the various financial things you could have, bonds, stocks, blah, blah, blah. And he says, if they're really, people are crazy, not only do they buy this stuff on 5% margin, but they borrow the money. Everyone in the class laughed. Made perfect sense to me. And that's how I made my first millions. I figured out, hey, you have this cash. And when you put that up for margin, you're going to get a return on that. So you're going to get something for that. And literally, that's how I became a millionaire. Doing exactly what the teacher said not to do.
Let me give you a word in your Wall Street lexicon that I know you love, which is the word Bayesian statistics. The idea that each prior is building, each next moment is building off the prior, an iterative type thing. Why don't you give the audience a feel for why Bayesian statistics is so important to you?
Okay. To me, Bayesian statistics is what life is about. Because you don't know how you're going to do in the next, but you know what a series of them are going to do. And the only thing that you can count is how, think what trend following does. It offers you a series of shots. doesn't guarantee that you're going to win, but it offers you a series of shots. So you can figure out where you're going to stand, and where you have to change that probability line. And they never mention this. When you take statistics in college, in high school, they always come back to the deck. The deck of 52 cards. But that's not really what it is when you're a speculator. We have a series of bets. And what you do is you count how those bets go. And that's how you get your Bayesian probability. Because a 300 hitter is not going to hit 600 for very long. Maybe a day. The math is an average.
We've talked about it before too, Larry. There are this trend following mindset. It applies to so many disciplines. We've been talking baseball, the Moneyball, the John Henry, but venture capital, movie financing, other sports like basketball. It's crazy. This style of thinking that you were one of the pioneers in has, for some niches of the world, really caught on. Some people have really taken to this trend following Bayesian, cut your losses mentality. I don't think by any stretch the majority of the world is there, but a lot of people have caught on to it and have applied it to a lot of other disciplines. That must have been interesting for you to observe something that you've known about for decades, and now to see other people apply it to other worlds.
Oh, I was amazed. First of all, one of the things they did was I looked at things where they actually used Bayesian statistics. And I could see that you could make money with those statistics. And it was a simple count. It was an average. So anybody can do an average.
Let me shift you to kind of a fun one. We joked about this one time in a conversation, and I actually wrote about it in your book. Your high school had a lot of interesting people that went to your high school. And so now I have to wonder, I don't think you've met him, but apparently Spock, Leonard Nimoy, went to your high school. Do you think some of that kind of logic rubbed off on you or something?
Maybe I rubbed off on him.
There you go, right?
Spock has a complete Bayesian way of looking at the world. He can tell you exactly what he's doing. He will know how many times out of 100 what he's got to do. And it's not a very hard thing because it's a mindset. And I found out that it works if you're running a gambling casino. It works if you do banking. It's a mathematical way of looking at the world, but you don't need a quadratic equation.
That's an interesting point, because you mentioned earlier learning disabilities, specifically dyslexia. I don't think I have dyslexia. I think I've been pretty lucky in that sense, but I know a lot of very bright people do. What was that like? How did you perceive the world in the sense of like, okay, you've got dyslexia. This is making it tougher to learn. What did you have to learn to get around the dyslexia to get to the understanding and the achievement? Can you explain what it was like to go around that learning disability?
I had to have what I call a cheat. I had to find a way to make sense of the world around me. But think about it. You're 15 years old and you can't hit a baseball. And you can't catch a baseball. And you live in a ball-centered society. So you got to figure out a way around it. You know, you're going to have to do that. I had a father who was not taking any excuses. He didn't care how how I did anything, I had to get it done. I had to support him, my mother, and my grandma. Period. That's it.
Things like peer pressure never really concerned you or bothered you. You were like, okay, I've got these limitations, and you just blew by them?
Well, I lost so much. I was always the last kid chosen for baseball or the last kid chosen for any sport. That was it. That's what I had. Look, you can argue with the world, but the world is still the world. So you figure out how to use what's in the world. That's it. Because you only got what you got. If you don't have it, you're going to have to find something to compensate.
When you hear people today, whether they're young people, older people, it doesn't really make a difference. I don't think you're not really a confrontational guy. Maybe you'll try and lead somebody to water, and it's up to them whether or not they'll go. But when you hear people with excuses, I mean, I kind of get the feeling that writing the book was a little bit of your way to let people know, like, when you've got an excuse, here's a better way to look at it.
Yeah, because they ain't going to buy you anything. So one of the great things about trend following, and when I did it, we called it across-the-board trend following. Because you start every day, you don't know what you're going to buy. You have all these futures in front of you. You take a shot, and then you got to go to the next shot. If that didn't work, you have to go to the next shot. You have to feed your family. So you're going to try. It's exactly like a peddler. Right? You know, I come from a family of peddlers.
Hey, you might need to define for maybe some of the millennials out there that have been living inside video games for the last 15 years. Maybe you might need to define peddler for them.
Immigrants, like my grandparents, got somebody to front them, something like clothes or whatever, and they went door to door and they tried to sell it. That's what they did. That's what they peddled. I don't know why they call it peddling. Maybe they were on bikes. I don't know. But they basically went through the South or from door to door and said, okay, you know, and when I grew up, I'm older than you, there used to be a guy who used to walk in the street and say, buy old clothes, buy old clothes. Selling the whole clothes. You didn't know who was going to do it. It's like when you go to a dance when you're a teenager, you don't know which girl is going to say yes or no. But after a while, if you have a little bit of math background, you say, you know, if I go to 100 girls, I'm going to get some.
Well, we've had that conversation many times. People sometimes don't think about their relationships like that, you know, you're still going to have a lot of strikeouts. The people that think they're going to meet the one lady or the one guy the first time, yeah, maybe you'll get lucky, but that's a bad way to run your life.
Yeah, I think so.
Explain why, the math behind it.
Think about what happens at a dance. If you're kind of a goofy blonde guy, you blind guy like I am, and a girl says, no, I don't want to dance with you. You're a jerk. You know, whatever.
You try one time, you go home crying, right?
No, because
I'm joking.
You don't have a choice to go home crying. So you look for another way.
Try again.
Try again. If you went to play baseball and you struck out once, would you quit the game?
Some people maybe. Maybe they go through one season and they have a down season and they back out, as opposed to another kid might have had an okay season, but then he says to himself, you know what, I can be better. And he works really hard in the off season and comes back the next year and he's better. It's what you've been getting at the whole, in your book, your life. It's the attitude. It's mindset.
Correct. You know who H.L. Hunt was?
The Hunt brothers?
Yeah, no, their father, H.L.
I don't know him specifically, but you're going to tell me.
I did someone a favor from Texas. They said, how can we pay you back? I said, oh, if you knew H.L. Hunt, I would like to have lunch with him or buy him a cracker. I want to find out what he did. H.L. Hunt never was worried about a dry hole. Never. He figured he was mathematically very apt. And he figured out there's an average. And the average is going to work for me. That's exactly what trend following was. That's exactly how romance works. That's how it works. That's the numbers.
You know what I just love about your stuff, I love about you, is this mentality is still rare today. The schools don't really talk about it. They really don't go there. The schools want to train kids like, here's the sociology degree to allow you to get a job to make 30 grand working for the man for hopefully the next 30 years. It's this entirely different way of thinking than you've talked about for the last hour.
I had no choice.
You created yourself no choice. You could have taken a job for the man.
Not really.
Shuffling paper, doing something.
Yeah, but I had a father who, although he wasn't wealthy, I was supposed to get wealthy. I am my father's son.
Well, in a way that you get the chance right now in your career, after a long career, you get to a career that's continuing. You get the chance to, in your book, pass along a lot of that motivation from your father. You're giving it to other people.
You know why I wrote this book? I wrote this book for my daughters. And I just wanted them to get what you just said. That you got to try. You change the odds just by getting up. And you have to do that. Because I will tell you, you will lose. That's it. You're going to have a loss. So you have to learn to live with that and move on and go get up again. And if you don't do that, I was in London. I was with Stanley Fink, who went on to be chairman of BAN. And I got out of the car and I stumbled. I managed, as I was stumbling, turn that into a roll. I hit the ground, but I rolled and I popped back up. He said, that's incredible. How'd you do that? I said, I've had a lot of practice falling. When you're lying, that is what happens. You trip over shit.
Hey, hold on. That's your first 4-letter word in 1 hour. I had to wait 60 minutes to get a 4-letter bomb from you. It's your first one. Was there some media training here? What's going on? Where's the real Larry? Who took the real Larry? Who stole him?
Well, no. What it said, you can't curse.
Oh, wow. Really? Well, there's not much cursing on this show, except if I'm talking by myself, sometimes I have a problem with the F-bombs. But as you know, I try to clean that up, though, because sometimes the people send me emails and they say, you don't sound very nice. And I'm not doing it on purpose. It just happens.
It fits well. Actually, cursing is a form of poetry. It delivers a lot of information.
I've read a bunch of articles that said smart people cuss a lot, so I like to just tell that to myself and pretend.
Okay. But no, I mean, it brings in a lot of emotion.
I mean, you and I have had plenty of conversations where it's very raw and very direct. Those are great conversations. I've enjoyed those so much over the years. We've got on the phone and talked about everything under the sun. And I think in this conversation, you've shared a lot of that attitude that you share with me. You're sharing in this conversation. And look, at the end of the day, somebody listens to Larry Hite for an hour and they're either motivated or they're not. I mean, you can't drag them to the water.
Right. And if they fail on day one, they'll pick themselves up. In the end, you've got to do what you got to do. Failure is not an option. Quitting is fatal. So you find, I've had terrible jobs. I sold Bibles door to door.
That's frightening.
And it was tricky doing thing because I had to guess in East New York or wherever I was in Brooklyn, and I had to either be from the parish or from the Protestant. By the way, the guy who owned the Bible company was named Cohen.
That's interesting.
It's really funny.
You've had a perspective where you can look back over decades and you've watched behavior of people in general beyond, musical tastes and clothing changes and all that kind of stuff. Do you think humans are pretty much the same, or do you think that stuff like these phones and the internet have changed people in the last 25 years in a way? Of course they have.
No, they haven't. They really don't. When prices go down, people get affected. Prices get up, they get affected. Because it's a herd mentality. And in fact, the more electronics we have, the more it all looks the same. I went back, going back to David Ricardo. I was looking at trading. It was a very big bust.
Some kind of fraud, something or another?
Yeah, the big broke. It was a big thing in England. Everybody wanted to own tulips. So I went back and I dug it up and I looked at the tulip data, made a chart. I like charts, very much so. And charts talk to me. And I will tell you, if I were living there and if I could have got my trades off, I would have made a fortune on the up and on the down. Because I don't like either side particularly.
Some of the smartest people in the day lost their shirts in that tulip thing.
Yeah. That's because they weren't trend followers. I had a friend of mine who went out and made some movies. I said, before I put on a trade, I know exactly where I'm going to exit if I'm wrong. He says, if I did that, I'd never make a movie. You are going to make errors. That's a fact of life. Babies, when they learn to walk, they have a great attitude. So they fall down and they laugh and get up and try again. Those are my heroes.
I don't know if you're referring to it directly, but do you remember the guest that I had on, Alison Gopnik, and she talked about Bayesian babies?
Yes, absolutely. No, I remember her very clearly. I saw that. I thought she was fabulous.
Yeah, I got to get her on again. I mean, her whole point for the audience that's not following along is basically babies, when babies learn, if they find something that works, they keep going that way. They don't let go. They keep going that way. And that's a very Bayesian trend following mindset.
Correct.
But they're open. They don't have a fixed view. They look at the world, they see everything in front of them, and they try. They're not like adults that are scared yet.
Well, they really, as they get older, especially early teens, they're very embarrassed when they fail. But failing is part of the game.
You do know that your thinking, I mean, it's advanced, of course, but your attitude and passion is kind of like a teenager still. You know that, right?
I've been told that. It's a very practical way to be. Look, he's trying to do a movie. I bet you've been told no 28 times. And you just look at that as information. That's all it really is. Why would you quit?
It's like leaving a mark. I mean, I think sometimes people get all caught up with, I've got to pay this bill, buy this car, buy this 2.5 bathroom house. At the end of the day, there's got to be a passion, something that's driving you where you're going to leave a mark. Look, you've just done a great job you've done it with your career though too, but it's got to feel extra special. You mentioned your daughters. It's got to feel extra special to leave a mark in the form of a book, because people are going to be reading that long after you and I are gone.
I hope so. Well, I hope that they will read it. one of my daughters was just really good at school. It was just boom. She's very clear what she's there, what she's going to do, and she did well. So she walks in to BU. And she wants to take like a master's class. But they talked to her for a while and said, no, you're not going to get a master's class. You're going to sit here and you're going to get a PhD, and we're going to pay for everything. She just had that skill. It's a skill. It's just like you can't be a very good baseball player if you're blind, but you can be a very good blind wrestler. But baseball would not be a sport for you.
I think what you're doing there too is really interesting. If people are not catching the nuance, is that you can get these dreams about what you want to do, but you got to be observant of, what your personal constraints are. And then once you know what your personal constraints are, the opportunities open up if you're wide-eyed.
Correct. Absolutely. You got it in one. But you're living proof of it. What have you done? 800 podcasts?
Larry, I'm just a guy somewhere in a fixed bunker location in Southeast Asia and you're one of the few people that has actually been inside the Southeast Asian bunker. And it's a very weird place, right? It's very scary. It's a very dangerous place with women that are wearing colorful dresses that are form-fitting, that look very terrible and unattractive, and everyone should stay away, right?
Yeah, that's why I go back. No, somebody has to do it.
Somebody has to do it. Yes, that's true.
No, I'm looking forward to doing more. I think Asian kids, at least the ones I meet, come out to the lectures. They want to improve themselves. They're looking for a way.
They don't work with excuses. They don't have excuses. They just say, we got to do it.
No. Yeah, no problem.
We should remind people, I don't have the exact dates yet, but people can reach out to me, your website, which is lawrenceheight.com, my website. You're going to be coming to Asia in the new year to speak. So anyone that's listening, if you want some information, drop me a line, drop Larry a line. We'll fill you in on those dates when they become available. So I'm looking forward to that. That will be fun. Hey, listen, I've kept you for a long time already. It's early morning out there. The book, The Rule, How I Beat the Odds in the Markets and Life, and How You Can Too. All information at lawrenceheight.com. The book is on Amazon, everywhere to be found. People need to check it out.
Thank you. I think it's practical stuff.
It's one guy's journey through the jungle, telling people what he learned along the way, right? I mean, that's, it's...
Yeah, I keep trying.
Larry, that's a great place to end it. I keep trying. Because if people stop trying, what happens?
Nothing.
Exactly.
Zero. And you got to be somewhat indifferent to results.
Good process. Let the outcome take care of itself, but have a good process.
Absolutely. And by the way, think about, you met some of the more important trend followers in the world. Can you name of any one of them that you've dealt with that didn't have that process?
That doesn't have the process, or they all have the process?
Yeah, trend following really does work. It works in every kind of business. It's like I tell people, let's say I had a store and you sold ladies' underpants, because that's what your family left you. You had this one store. And the store had red underpants and white underpants.
Hold on, is this Victoria's Secrets, or you're talking white underpants? I'm in the Victoria's Secrets. I don't know where you are.
Okay, well, I'm making it up as I'm going along. But the point is, ladies came in and just wanted to buy red. You wouldn't reorder white, would you?
Not if they wanted red.
It's right. That's what trend following is about. That's why I thought your article on Jeff Bezos was so correct. In fact, there are a whole bunch of companies are now applying his methodology, which by the way, is not new.
It's David Ricardo 101.
But in America, people used to get a big book from Sears Roebuck. Basically, what business is, you get another version of Sears Roebuck. And it's a great version because you don't have to cover the cash. But the ads in, the people come in with their credit cards, so you essentially finance your inventory.
It's the richest guy in the world idea. We got to give him props for that, huh? But, you know, he makes the point, though, too. Inside of Amazon, like the Amazon itself was a great idea, but he's tried a lot of things. He's had a lot of small failures, and he'll say that. If you listen to him, he'll say, you know, listen, you guys see all the things we've done that are great, but you don't see a lot of the things that we've tried that we failed on.
You don't see Abraham's failure. You look at the annual report. I wrote this book. I don't need money, right? Selling the book and going on the road is not going to make me any money. I'm going to give it all away anyway. So what I'm doing is to show kids like me that, yeah, there is a way. And you can't, just because something doesn't work, every time you get a no, you're closer to a yes. And that's something that millennials don't seem to grasp. But it's something everybody should grasp.
Listen, we're going to have to do part 2 of this conversation in Asia in person. I think it's even more fun when we can sit down and kind of chat that way. Let me just remind the audience as we go out, though, the rule, how I beat the odds in markets and life, and how you can too. The website, lawrenceheidt.com. The book's out. Website's up. People need to go check it out. Larry, go enjoy that New York City morning. Damn, where does time fly when you're having fun? 900 episodes. What the F? Started this in early 2012. It's 2020. I'm somewhere in parts unknown. Little reverence to Mr. Bourdain. Rest in peace. 900 episodes. Yeah, Joe Rogan's got me beat, but Joe's making a boatload of money off his podcast. I'm going to have to switch it off to video at some point in time. It's just a lot of damn work. I would love to hear an interview with Joe about doing the video all the time. I mean, producing a show on video versus producing a show on a podcast, light years difference. A podcast is easy if you got good guests. If the host is, maybe somewhat competent, maybe not completely off his rocker, then maybe you got something. But damn, that video stuff, I don't know how people do it. I mean, I know how they do it. You get the setup. This is why Joe has the studio. He just rolls in, hangs out with his buddies or other guests that become his buddies, and you turn the cameras on. It's a great setup, but it's a lot of damn work. I give Rogan all the credit in the world. It ain't easy. Now, I'm not saying 900 podcast episodes with a gazillion different guests of all different types of expertise is easy either, but it gets easier. There becomes a certain rhythm to talking to people. I remember starting only with trading guests and then flipping to everybody under the sun. I like to tell the story, and I tell it on this podcast all the time. Once Daniel Kahneman said yes, the Nobel Prize winning psychologist, that for me was, I could ask anybody. Because if I could get Kahneman to come on, hell, the worst that somebody can say to me is no, F you, Mike, I'm not coming on. That doesn't bother me at all. I could care less. I mean, I could care in the sense that if I ask somebody, that means I want to have them. But if they say no, I still sleep like a damn baby. My guest today is a longtime friend. I believe I sat down with him for the first time in his house in 2005. Central Park South, Larry Height. He might have been Central Park on the west side when I first met him, and then he moved. Larry is a trader. Larry was first featured in Jack Schwager's Market Wizards, one of those voices along with Ed Sakota that you just don't forget. Even before you hear his voice in person, his thinking, his writing on the page, you don't forget. And that first Market Wizards book, all the credit to Jack and his traders that he found and put together, that's a classic. And Larry's right in there. Now, I've also featured Larry in some of my books, Trend Following, The Little Book of Trading. He was in my film, Broke the New American Dream. He's been on this podcast many times. I did a foreword for his first book last year called The Rule. And he happens to be my guest, number 900 today. Now, we actually did this conversation on Zoom, but both of us were kind of set up bad. So we have some video, but we both look kind of out of it. So I think all you're going to get is some audio. But like Larry does every time, there's that nugget. There's that way that he says something where you just walk away saying, okay, I'm inspired. If he can do it, I can do it. Maybe you don't get the Larry Height success. Maybe you get close. Maybe you don't get close. It doesn't matter. It's the wisdom. You take the wisdom, you take a shot, and that's all you can do. Because if you don't take a shot, what do you got? You're just somebody sitting around talking at the bar, some bullshitter. So damn it, turn on the headphones, turn on the podcast, whatever you do to listen. And give my guest number 900, Larry Height, a little bit of attention. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Let me start you off today, though. You're not 18. I'm not 18. But I talk to a lot of young people. A lot of young people, they come on my social media. Their attitude, sometimes I can feel this kind of negative attitude. And I kind of look at it like, if you're alive, you got a chance to do something. So the question I have from you right at the start, why such a good attitude? Why do you have a good attitude?
Because my grandmother, my father's father, my father's mother, had a good attitude. And it came from her to my father to me. And more importantly, the only sensible, skip the curse word, the F thing to do is be positive. Because let's say you're so negative, you never try. If you never try, you got 100% chance of failing. This goes from picking up girls to getting into school, 0 trying, 0 results. If you are inept, as you know I was as an athlete, as you know I had dyslexia, when you try, you have better than a 0 chance. And that's the only logical way to go.
I don't know. You tell me these stories about you not being an athlete. How do I know they're not true? You could have been some star New York City track guy. I don't know. You're just kind of making up these stories 60 years later that you weren't a star.
I was less than a star. No, it's just, I'm not writing this book, but I've been going around talking to people. Yesterday, I talked to the guy who was a major hockey player since he was 7. And then from a young age, he was somebody colleges looked at. He was in a car. The car had a head-on collision. His best friend died, broke vertebrae in his back. So I went to see this guy because I'm interested in how did he come back? What made him come back after that? He had an attitude. He knew that if he didn't try, he'd have nothing. I once told you the story that this guy, I told you about Harry. All Harry would do was walk up to really good looking girls, say, Harry and I seem to have jobs of no account. We left late. Only Harry left with a beautiful girl. And I left with either my girlfriend at the time or nothing. Give more weight into nothing than a beautiful girl. Harry and I became friends. Days of marijuana. I could get marijuana cheaper, so we became friends. I said, how do you get these beautiful women? Now I'm like 28. And he says, oh, every time I see a gorgeous woman, I go up to her and say, my name's Harry. Let's have coffee. Then he said, Larry, 1 out of 10 who go to coffee wind up again, 1 out of 8 sleeping over. Now, to a 28-year-old horny kid, these are my 2 favorite subjects, sex and probabilities. I really began to understand my grandmother because if you don't try, you get 0. If you try, you can do very well. That to me is not a positive attitude, but a practical attitude.
So many people think of trying in their head, failing in their head, and do nothing.
Correct. But what does that get you?
Nothing.
Right. Right. So I figured the odds. Being, me, I then started off with beautiful girls. I remember the first beautiful girl I went to. I walked up to her and I said, if I would design a woman, she'd look like you. She came back and slept over.
The first shot.
First shot, beginner's luck. Then, well, all commodity traders are successful, are compulsive. So then I went to ugly girls. And I found out I didn't do quite as well with ugly girls as pretty girls. But I actually made counts because that's what works.
Beyond the probability, there's something else you're bringing up there too, which is to approach a beautiful woman who is often not approached. People don't realize that she might like that attitude you're bringing. She likes that moxie that you're bringing.
Well, she's horny. I don't know why. And I saw that. I actually wanted to talk to you about Amazon.
You're talking about horny girls. You want to talk about Amazon, but you're talking about being horny and girls. I can't control you.
I can go anyway, because there was the article that you wrote. It wasn't an interview, and it was that Jeff Bezos is an across-the-board trader.
A trend follower.
A trend follower. Well, I thought about that, and it's true. I'm 80 next April, and I was telling my friend Max, I've had maybe 2 losing years. One of them was because the people at Man, who I like and loved and made a lot of money with, wanted to take the leverage up. That was not a good idea. Trend following is great. It's made me who I am. I'm an aspirin in the biggest suite in the hotel, but trend following has always worked for me. And when I read your article, I looked at what Bezos had going for him. First of all, he didn't have to put up any money. You're looking puzzled, but he really didn't.
Hold on, I'm looking puzzled?
Yeah.
This is like the first video interview that I have ever done for the podcast.
Really?
True. It's easier to do audio because video, you have to set all this stuff up, but Zoom is making it easy now.
They didn't have to Michael Dell saw this right from his room in college. The kid who bought the computer from him uses his credit card. Bezos and that guy, and now almost everybody, gets paid before the delivery. I couldn't figure out them at all. I'm in really good company because Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, and Larry Height, and I was with a guy today, none of us could figure out what Bezos was doing. He built his infrastructure for speed. He didn't have to put out money. It was really, but it took me years to figure that out.
Larry, you're making the case that essentially being a good entrepreneur is being a trend follower, and being a trend follower is being a good entrepreneur.
Well, who are the richest people around?
They follow trends. I mean, no one gets to be Jeff Bezos rich unless something big comes from nowhere and goes to the moon.
Correct. If I may tell you, I work with this incredible guy. He went to Wharton. He was all on scholarship, both as a football player and as a scholar. He's just one of those annoying people. I told him about the 52-week high. He came out to Colorado to visit me because his wife was prepping the house to sell in Texas, big university there. His wife said, go visit Larry. So they come in, and he says, hey, it worked. Well, I say so much bullshit. I said, what? What he did was he took the 52-week high, and if it dropped down 5%, he got out the first time. If it went back up, he got in. He was wrong 85% of that time. 85%. He turned $1 million in the simulation into 20. 20. Average 20% a year. You know, from the book I read, which is pure David Ricardo. Get rid of your losses. And that's why I called it the rule.
For average people, if you got 85% losers, for average people, that's disappointing. If you have average psychology, average understanding of the markets, 85% losses sounds frightening, horrifying to the average person. If they don't have Larry Height's superpowers, it sounds terrible.
But no, Larry Height was lucky enough. You visited my house, you know. I have a computer. My friend did that with a small computer. First of all, he's a multimillionaire to begin with. So he was doing it just to see if what I said works. And he's mathematical. He knows the law of large numbers.
He wanted to test you?
No, he just one of these rare people who's a man of action, real good athlete, scholarship, and he does. Where other people talk, he does.
How does you, maybe myself in some ways, how do you get around disappointment? How do you take an average person who doesn't have your lucky experience, as you call it, and get around disappointment?
Because I went with a guy. Do you know Harold Janine, who's head of
I do not.
Billionaire. He invites me to lunch. I'm 30. He met me through another friend. And he says to me, I mean, he's now like, he could have been my grandfather. He says to me, Larry, he bought telephone companies all over the effing world. He said, buying companies, Larry, is not like going to the movies. Now, I'm sitting with a billionaire. I don't want to be a dummy, but I'm not making the connection between movies and buying companies. So I say, Harold, I'm a little slow here. Could you wind back and explain this to me? He said, Larry, you go to the movies, you buy a ticket, and then you sit down in the movie and you sit there till the movie ends. He says, when I buy a company, before I give the money, I have to know how the end is going to be. We can take a computer and we can make a database. We can test. Once you have that, I'm sitting here with my friend Max. He does a lot of nice things for me, but he won't take any money. I'm showing him how to do counts. Before I do something, I've done thousands of counts. So I don't have to have courage. I just have to know to add. Let's face it, Mike, you know most of the top players. Very few people need great mathematical skill to do the trend following. I mean, you got to add, divide, and know how to do probability. How many guys have you spoke to use calculus?
To be a trend follower?
Yeah.
None. Surely some of them know how to do it exactly, but it's not relevant to what they're doing with their trading.
Right. Any 12-year-old kid could do all the math necessary. Probably an 8-year-old, because it's averages, probability, and most of all, risk management.
That's why you're here today, right?
Having been dyslexic, blind, and one eye, half blind, another idea, I'd be either a broken down comedian or a floor washer.
Hold on, let's see. If you did not have risk management, you would be a broken down comedian or a floor washer. That is a fantastic quote from one of the best trend following traders, a broken down comedian or floor washer.
But you got to see what it is. You learn these things. Look, you and I are very good friends. One of the most fun people I ever speak to. Yes, it was one time I called you by mistake at 4:00 in the morning here. And then I was I really wanted to go to sleep. You remember this incident. But I was so embarrassed.
But hold on, I'm on the other side of the planet. So for me, it was the middle of the afternoon.
That's why I started it. But you and I are very good friends because of communication, right?
What kind of communication?
Well, I don't know. We talked about everything. We talked about your thing in politics. I remember you were a catcher. You talk trash talk all the time.
I never talk any shit, Larry.
I'm from Brooklyn, and most of you people who aren't from New York sound to us Brooklyn people like you're talking shit all the time.
I got to tell you, as you're saying this, though, when I first started to come to New York, maybe in the, I don't know, early 2000s, I think, something, been there maybe once or twice, but once I started to get friends from New York, it's a really interesting thing because for most of my life, people are pretty tame. The Washington, D.C. area, people are pretty middle of the road. I've got a salty tongue. I'll drop the F-bombs. I'll say that stuff. Then when I get to New York, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, okay, my tribe has been up here all along hiding from me.
Yeah. I'll tell you a test I did. I think I must have told you this before. So I'm doing what my group was the first $1 billion across the board trade to reach $1 billion.
A fund, CTA commodity fund.
Yeah. Peter, my main partner, said, we have a great system. I said, no. I said, but what do you mean? I said, Alex Kraserman, who I'm still very good friends, and we own a lot of real estate together. I get Alex in, I said, here's what I want you to do. We're doing 3,200 trades a year. Set up a random number generator that will pick what to trade, when to get in. But one thing, they couldn't be random. was when to get out.
So random trades, random entry, and a hard stop.
Correct. So I do this and it comes out better than our system, right? I thought that was really interesting. And I have a philosophy called leverage, asymmetrical leverage. Think about a stop. When you go in and buy a new high, just to say, you put your stop in, or even better than that, you buy a call. You know exactly what you're going to lose, but you don't know how much you're going to make. It was an asymmetrical bet. You could lose $2 and you could have bought Amazon and gone up 500%.
Hey, let me keep you at that point with the fund with Alex and the random system. So you have Alex put together a random system, random entry, random market selection, a fixed hard stop. It does better than the fund that you are promoting to all these clients that has raised $1 billion. And you're sitting here in the office looking at a random system and you know it's better, but because of the way the fund management world works, you can't really tell your client base, we've got this random system because they won't buy it.
Right. But I had learned something very better than money. I learned how to bet. And I learned the fallacy of a magic way. The magic way is getting yourself into a position, and every entrepreneur, I don't care who it was, who makes real money, gets into a position where they can lose a small amount and make a big amount. That's the game. It's exactly what Bezos does. If he tries a product and it doesn't work, he gets rid of it.
Now, just look, because of the law, various mathematical laws, not everybody is going to become Bezos. That's not the issue. The issue is for your life, can you do much better in your life? Maybe you'll be the next Bezos, but probably not. But can you do much better in your life with his strategy than not? And the answer is clearly yes.
Yeah. I'll tell you a story. So we have his friend, two friends, meet at the Aspen Ideas Festival, which is something I tell you got to do. It's the only place I've ever been where consistently the audience is as smart or smarter than worldwide expert. That's the place. I come here, meet these people. He's a doctor, retired surgeon. She runs a big educational company. Surgeons are by nature picky people. You want a surgeon to look very carefully at what he's doing.
Very precise people.
He builds her a portfolio, becomes worth a couple $1 million. She's in a beauty parlor. The women are in a panic over the disease, the virus. They're all going to sell their stock.
Let me set this up really quick though, Larry. So you got the friend, she knew somebody who was smart, helped her get a portfolio. The portfolio is many millions of dollars. And she goes to the beauty shop. All the ladies are worried about COVID. And now she wants to sell.
And she sells everything but the gold. So her husband, he said, I'm out of managing your money. I've spent years doing this. I made you rich. I am not going to F this again. She calls me up, says, Larry, what do I do with the gold? And she calls me several times. I said, well, you want to know the real truth? Sell the gold and buy Amazon. Why did I say this? Gold can only do three things. It can go up, it can go down, or it can stand still. The one thing you can possibly make more money power is it goes up faster than inflation. Because with trillions of dollars worth of debt, the only sensible thing the United States can do be keep as a world leader, it cannot default on the debt. So if you're not defaulting on the debt, what's the most intelligent thing to do? Inflate out. You inflate out, you're still a leader. The whole thing about money is buying power.
Now, listen, if you're wrong here, if you're wrong on this economic political prescription, you've got a stop loss. I mean, your ego's not here. If you're saying this is how it can unfold and it doesn't unfold that way, you're prepared to go the other way.
Always. I'm not here to prove I'm a guru. Do this because I said, I'd rather have 1,000 bets than one bet. There are many ways for Jeff Bezos to win. There's only one way for the gold to win, that it outpaces inflation. It's the only way. If it keeps up with if it keeps up with inflation, you're nowhere.
You know what's funny about gold? How many people, Larry, in the last, let's say, 40 years or whatnot, are still influenced by that 1979, 1980 gold move? They always just think that that exact same thing is going to happen. That keeps so many people fixated on gold.
And that's why I had a good friend of mine who was a very good arbitrager. I'm on the phone with him. Silver's very high. He says, well, it can't go down. I said, I don't see why it can't go down. Where is it written? And he gave me 20 facts. I said, well, it's dropped below the 30-day low. So clearly it can go down because there it was down. That's a fact. Look, I'm talking to my friend Max 2 days ago because he set this all up for me. Without him, I would not. And I said, I like numbers more than charts, but I started out as a chartist. The market tells you stuff. It really does. If you fail to make a new high and the next low is lower than the previous high, that's going down. The market is right there on paper. Failed one, went lower than the next low. I only have one eye, but I could see that. It's not, I like numbers because with numbers I could do probabilities. I'm on a plane with somebody, sitting in first class. She tells me she lives in New York. She got adopted by, after the war, rabbis in New York went to the builders and said there's a lot of Jewish, or they think it's Jewish, orphans. She was adopted by a New York builder. When it was all over, she is worth $500 million. She says, I'm putting half of it in gold in Switzerland. I said, look, if they start throwing atomic bombs around, how the fuck are you going to get to Switzerland?
Yeah, no, hold on. In her defense, atomic bombs at Switzerland so far has not happened. So far.
Look, you spend a lot of time in Chicago. You used to.
Right.
Chicago has a lot of murders. In Chicago, it's very easy to buy a gun on the street. The gun of choice in the last couple of years is a Glock. You ever shoot a Glock?
I have.
Very fast gun. It's almost like a machine gun. You put one the trigger, brrr, take a 15-year-old boy with no father and a mother who works 3 jobs and a Glock. And the only family he has is other 15-year-old boys. Boys, Glocks equal murder. Because you're 15 years old, you don't know what you're doing, but you have this incredibly fast weapon. Certain things happen. So if you start to throw one bomb around or several, very bad shit's going to happen.
Your point there with the atomic bombs in Switzerland and whatnot is to get people to think about what's the worst case scenario. Because we did not think at one point in time that Chicago would have dozens of people dying per day. And now they're out there robbing on the Magnificent Mile. So things that we can never imagine can happen, is your point.
Yeah. Look, what's the most common thing in the markets?
Crazy.
No. You know the most common thing? The most fundamental thing. Most fundamental thing in the markets are people. If you don't have people, you don't have a market.
Well, people are crazy, though.
Yeah, people, no, but they're a special kind of crazy. People are herd animals, like sheep or cattle.
When you say that, though, if you think about it, people are like herd animals, like sheep, like cattle. That's another strike at the ego, isn't it?
But it happens to be true. It's true.
Years ago, Larry, when you were in my film, I actually went to a sheep farm to film those sheep for this very same reason and to watch hundreds of sheep running together. And they were so frightened. And it was it didn't translate well to film, but in person, it was amazing to watch.
Yeah, and scary. And that's what happens. We have a mayor in New York City who's really stupid, and really corrupt and lazy. The lazy is his best trait because he does fewer stupid things. He decided to defund the police, the real street police. Magically, we're getting 8 to 10 kills a day. I don't know what to say about it.
It's what you were just saying a second ago about Chicago. How could one ever expect that all of Midtown Manhattan would be closed? They would be stealing at Saks. They would be defacing the churches. There would be violence everywhere. You've lived in New York for so long. You've got a great place there. Back to the lady example that wanted to put the gold in Switzerland. Your point is, imagine it. It can happen.
Because it does.
Crazy things happen.
Crazy things happen. All the good managers in our business are not bold, crazy people. They are very good risk takers. By the way, I'll tell you a great Ed Secoda story. I had a partner who hid a trade, comes into our lawyer's office and says, I'm going to tell you something that I'm going to jump out the window. Okay? He hid his trade. He was the inside guy. I was the outside guy. So I had to go home and tell my wife that we could be bankrupt. As it turned out, I turned it around. This is a great kind of a Jewish story. I was brought up as most immigrants. You notice there are immigrant neighborhoods in every major city because they all flock to where they know people. I was brought up and told since I was 3 years old that it was my job to support my parents and my grandparents. Couldn't argue with that because my father supported his mother, my mother's mother, and my rich uncle put everybody in the family chipped in to help us. My Italian friends all bought a house 3 generations would go in. My father got an apartment for my grandmother. So this was my job. I'm an only child to support them. Considering I was shitty at school, shitty at sports, I knew I had to be rich. So that was my goal. That's what I had to do. And in Brooklyn, the mafia was considered like the Knights of Columbus.
The good guys. It's how the world was.
Yeah, that's right. You can't today If you haul garbage from a manufacturer, you can only haul it from the guy who works that thing. You didn't get it hauled by them. You get a dump back on your stand. There are unions. The union guys knew my father's business as well as he did. The guy would come, hey, George, you got a problem. They want to have a strike. And they knew that my father's absolute time that he had to be open, otherwise he missed the season. But I tell you, George, you're a friend of mine. I always liked you. I think I could get this settled for you for $10,000. Was my father angry? No. My father said to me, that's the cost of doing business. And that's the world I grew up in. My father wasn't a criminal, but if he wanted to get something done, had to do that. I always knew that it was my job to support it, no matter what. I support a cousin. I give her $10,000 a year, which one thing she has to promises me that she won't call me because she's so depressing to talk to.
You're so bad. Hey, I got to tell you on the union story, to share one back with you. Early 20s, mid 20s, I was assisting one of those conference events that you used to attend in Chicago. And it was at one of the fancy hotels downtown Chicago. John Henry was speaking. This is before the speech. So I'm in an empty hall with a couple organizers, and we're kind of setting things up before everybody comes in. And someone looked at me and they said, Mike, walk over there and turn the lights on over on the side of the hall. Now, this is probably like 1,000 people go in this hall. So I start to walk over to turn the lights on. Some guy starts screaming at me, don't you dare touch that light switch. Only a union member could turn those lights on.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Now, I thought it was stupid. I still think it was stupid. But the reality is, even if something's dumb, it can still be real. And if it's real, it's the cost of doing business. And if it's the cost of doing business, don't argue with the cost of doing business. Just do the damn business, because we can't solve everything in life.
Right. Exactly. I called my father and I said, look, I got a problem. I owe $7 million more than I have. And my father says to me, no, Larry, you don't have the problem. The guy you owe the money to has the problem.
He framed it in a different way.
Yeah. I go in to see the guy. He's a bond trader. And he starts to talk tough to me. New Yorkers don't know how to talk any other way. So the guy starts to walk towards me. I turn to him and say, stop. The best thing you could do is kill me. So I am not afraid of you at all.
The worst thing he can do is kill you.
No, it would be best. I'd solve all the fucking problem. Right?
But he won't have his money if you're dead. There's no money if you're dead.
That's what I explained to him. The only way you get paid if I can convince these other guys to put more money in. He, being a Southerner, very bright guy, he says, yeah, what are we going to do? His partner walks in. It's the coolest thing. He started with the tough guy routine. He turned to his partner and said, Larry and I did that dance already. I worked it out.
I think what you're giving is kind of a lesson of thinking about how to frame issues, to solve problems, and to try and take the emotion to the side. And if you can put the emotion to the side, there's a way to get both sides to where they can best get for that point in time.
Sometimes emotions work, but under real pressure, they might not work. But when you're a cross-the-board trader, I could trade anything. I think this guy's a really smart guy, but we have to as good traders, control our emotions. There's no better way to control your emotions than have a method, because then you know what to do. When I thought I was going broke, do you remember the King Biscuit Flower Hour?
I do. All the rock bands.
Right. My cousin put that together, invented that. I knew a woman named Mary Alberti. She went to Wharton. She was very smart. I was feeling very depressed because of my partner and what to do. She said, "Oh, I have a friend you should talk to, Ed Zakota." So I called Ed Zakota up. She had called. He said, "I could see you 2 Thursdays from now at 1:00. I go into the King Biscuit Flower House studio. My cousin gives me a studio and a mic so I could be clear, and Ed Dakota. And he says to me, look, it's a really simple business. Decide how much you're willing to lose and go with the trend. I knew that. I've done more simulations than the years the Jewish people have lived, more than 5,000 simulations. So he was telling me something that I knew, and I felt great.
He's a really magical guy in that kind of a way.
He's a magical guy in all kinds of ways.
Remember, I think it was 2012. Gosh, time flies, right? 2012, you, me, Ed on stage in Chicago. That was quite fun.
And with his guitar.
Yeah, banjo.
A banjo. I said, and he said, look, it doesn't matter. You could have a 2% stop, 5% stop, a 10%, but you got to keep to the discipline. That just, I knew that. I knew that as well as anybody. I've been always thankful to him for that. And it was certainly an honor to be with him.
I think I met him for the first time in 2001. Look, I mean, he's a man too, so he puts his pants on. He learned a lot of interesting things from interesting people too. So I guess the fun thing is that he put a lot of work in, he put a lot of time in, but then he's also given back to tell other people what he's learned.
Yeah, well, look, you'll understand this. I figured out a way. I'm 80 years old, April.
A youngster, a teenager.
I was at a guy's house for lunch before him, who's 99. He's a really interesting guy and a billionaire. Mutual friend, thought we'd have a good time together, and we did. We had a lot of fun. And he had done a lot of interesting stuff. So he invited me back to a club. I could learn a lot from him. Do you know why Buffett bought Berkshire Hathaway?
I assume because he knew that particular company would make a nice vehicle for other plans that he had. And again, I'm going a little bit from memory here. And that ultimately this notion of acquiring insurance businesses, that this would all work well in that structure.
Yes, because he didn't want to buy it. Textile were failing, but they had NOLs. So he used the NOLs not to pay taxes, which is in no book, but I was talking to one of the guys who put it together, the 99-year-old guy. And he used NOL. If you think about it, you could see.
Define for the audience NOL so everyone's following along.
Losses, previous losses, not used.
Prior losses on the books that you can use currently.
Buffett never says this in public, but the merger gave him all his tax-free earnings. So it wasn't a surprise a couple of years later. He got fully out of the textile business. He was using the NOLs. You wouldn't have known that. I wouldn't have known. I never read it. anywhere. But this guy told me the real story. And I could see it because I'll tell you my quick Buffett story. Do you remember Adam Smith?
Of course. Wealth of Nations.
No, that is a great book. No, Adam Smith was a Jewish guy who used Adam Smith's name because he didn't want to give out his name. He was on public television introducing Buffett. Now I'm sitting there. I was doing very well for me at my age. I'm saying to myself, I'm making a couple $100,000 a year. I'm a kid. I say, why don't I understand the words this guy's saying? I know he's saying something important. I don't understand what he's saying. But I could see he was smart. Maybe this would be a smart thing for me to learn. So I knew I could not get the trades from the partnership. But Berkshire had been in business for 20 years buying stocks. I got the list of every stock he bought and the date. And then I went to Value Line and I bought the page and the date and the print of everything he bought. And I got 3 guys who were like me, said, I'm going to find out what he did. And after a while, I was buying his stocks before they were announced because I saw what he was doing. I didn't go any further than that because I figured out that if Warren Buffett magically said to me, Larry, I'm going to give you everything that I know, I came to the conclusion that his knowledge was a 10-gallon pail, and I had a 5-gallon pail. So if he gave me all his knowledge, 5 gallons are going to go on the floor. So I took what I thought were his most important things, and I used them. And the way he looked at it in an equation, not like an algorithm. He takes the cash flow after tax on top, takes the price of the stock plus the debt. What was his after-tax yield? How long did it last? And that's exactly what you would do if you were buying a business. And I said, that's the key to his wealth, was compounding. So I bought 11 stock, Berkshire Hathaway. Today, at $11,000 a stock, because I still wasn't sure. Today, that's $300,000 a share. But it took me a long time because I knew he was smarter than me. That was apparent. I put it away. And a lot of people who do trends don't trend the right things. I could see his cash flow growing. So that was one of the things that I looked at even more than the price. And he was winning. I stayed. Then I had, this is really weird, I had too much money in my IRA or whatever it was. I bought more Berkshire, the bees, and I let him keep going. That grew into millions of dollars. But I was trend following all the time. I was not only trend following the price, I was following the cash flow. I was trend following, but anyway, it was interesting thing that you could take cash flow, you could break down parts of company, see how each part was performing, where was the money coming from, and where was it going. So this guy, Mike Covel, I'm teaching for Alex Reserman once a year. Kids always ask questions. I took your podcast, walked into the room, turned it on, and said, sit there. You're going to learn something.
My podcast.
Your podcast of the Jeff Bezos is a trend follower.
Do you know how long, if you're a brand new person to my podcast, I think I crunched it, counting up the hours. I think it would take 30 days listening 24/7 to listen to the entire podcast now. That's how many hours there are. A month. You just sit down, put the headphones on and listen for a month, nothing else, 24/7. That's crazy.
No, it's not.
I don't think it's crazy, but I look back on it 8 years later, you're like, a lot of content.
But you have very smart people you interview. And you're a good, and so it's like getting an MBA sometimes, and it's not all finance.
Yeah, everyone diverse.
Right. To me, like another degree. In fact, I was on a bike in the gym. I had my cell phone, but I didn't have earphones. So I'm in the gym, and there's a girl behind me. So I'm playing it to hear this thing, and I'm riding on the bike. I say to her, I hope I didn't disturb you. And she said, oh, far be it. That's the most interesting bike ride I ever had.
Hold on, you were listening to my podcast.
And she's overhearing me.
And some hot girl is listening to the podcast.
Right.
She's not even interested in you. She's interested in the guy who's on the podcast talking.
Who your guest was, or whatever. I just said, geez, this is really great. This is really, I don't get to hear this stuff. I remember that. Because you do a good job in what you're doing, and it's interesting. If somebody went and listened to 800 of those things, they would have a very good education about the world, because of the diverse of people. You really do have Nobel Prize winners. You do have very good traders. And I think there's a lot of, and you saw them, life lessons that come from being what it takes to be a trader. Self-mastery, study, and taking action. All the people you have know something, have done something what they know. So it makes a very good, you see a lot of people talk, very few people do. You give the combination of both.
I'm very lucky right now that I get a significant number of really, really, as you talk about, kind of accomplished people, interesting people. And it somewhat feeds on itself now. I mean, I have a lot of publishers and PR firms, et cetera, are always saying, hey, what do you think about this person? What do you think about that person? I mean, they came to me in the last couple of years and said, hey, do you want to have Howard Marks on? Billionaire. Do you want to have Tom Golisano on, who started Paychecks? Billionaire. I mean, I'm just kind of hanging out and you get a chance to talk to all these interesting people. It's great.
I think so.
Just like you today, Larry in Aspen.
Yeah, and hopefully Larry doesn't get fried in action. This state is on fire. My friends from Vail came to visit us. Guy is very top money manager, was president of the Philharmonic, New York Philharmonic. Very smart. He got a great wife, just terrific person. So they drive here, 2-hour drive, 7 hours to come home because of smoke. You know, it's bad. You must come to the Ideas Festival.
What's I can get out of Corona, Asia, travel bans right now. They've really made getting around difficult internationally. James Altucher, an author I know who I respect, does nice stuff. He's a lifelong New Yorker. He wrote a really interesting piece the other day, and he basically said he loves New York. He's got businesses in New York, family, everything. But he wrote an interesting piece, and he said, and I'm paraphrasing, New York is dead and it's not coming back.
Well, I hope not. But I'm going to tell you, the best thing about the mayor is that he's lazy. That's the best you can say about him.
I mean, he can't mess up things even more, perhaps.
Yes, his wife, who he made something, can't give an accounting of $700 million on projects. When asked about that, her response was, there are always negative people.
You've got a great place in New York City. You love the city. Does my friend, does he have a point? If things got in so bad, so many people leaving, I mean, all the stores are boarded up. There's like 10% of the people that would normally come to those towers are in New York City. Have things shifted in such a way that it's going to take a very, very long time to get back?
I don't know. There's a guy named Cohn who owns a lot of New York real estate. He wants to get the mayor out. He's willing to put $1 million behind that. I am now a Florida resident.
That says something right there, right?
Right.
Will you keep your place in New York?
Yes, but I have to be out of New York City.
Tax rules, like half the year or something.
Half a year.
I've already kept you longer than I was supposed to. The book that everyone needs to check out, The Rule, How I Beat the Odds in the Markets and in Life, and how you can too. Larry Hite. People have to check that out. Larry, now that we're on Zoom, man, this is like we're next door neighbors.
Yes, we are. And that's nice.
Really, seriously.
This is your 800th?
You are going to be number 900.
900. Well, okay, great. I like talking to you. I talk to you when we're not on. I mean,
I wish we had some of these crazy conversations that we've had when we weren't on.
But we didn't know if they'd allow them on.
I'm the producer. Anything can go on. Hey, listen, you go enjoy your night. We'll catch up soon, sir.
Okay. By the way, you look really great.
You look good too. We're like two male models right now.
Yeah.
Larry, take care. We'll talk soon.
Okay, bye.
My guest today, a repeat guest, a good friend, somebody who I talk to regularly, but I don't often put those conversations on the show. And I know he was comfortable with me sharing this conversation. So here it is. Today, my conversation is with Larry Hite. Larry was originally profiled in the book, The Market Wizards by Jack Schwager. Larry also has a book called The Rule, came out a few years ago. He is a trend-following trader. He is a legendary trend-following trader. And I hope you enjoyed this conversation.
Hello, Michael.
Hey, Larry, how are you?
Well, I'm sad and glad. I was going to write a book about losing and the benefits of losing. I was going to make up funny names for all the actual people I know or know of, was close enough to really know them, who lost a lot of money. It was very interesting. I took everybody's story that I knew. You've read William O'Neill, right?
I've not interviewed him, but I know of him, yes.
You never will interview him.
Oh, is he gone?
Well, he's halfway gone. He's got dementia.
Ah, okay.
But anyway, O'Neill tells a story. There's this guy, Dreyfus. And Dreyfus had like a $15,000 stock fund. And every year, he was doubling the return of the whole industry. Right? If they made 30, he made 60. O'Neill lays out a chart of every one of those stocks. And these were his words. Every one of those stocks made a new all-time high. Not some, not a few, not mostly, but all of them. I have found that, and I've known this, but I don't know how, it's very simple to make money in the South, in any kind of market, provided you have in my case, the laziness to follow a system, or, somebody gets a loan. I went to everybody. They either got into a business where they were picking up pennies on railroad tracks.
And the long-term capital management guys.
Yeah, among others. There's this train coming. You jump in, you get the pennies. Now, I'm not saying that everybody dies when they do this. Pretty close to it. Those guys died. That's one thing. They were right a lot, but wrong for also a lot. Their losses were few, but huge.
They had so many winners that were looking great for so long. The strategy that they either developed or fell into, they just didn't contemplate that one big loss would just take out everything, take out all the work.
Yeah, 2 Nobel Prizes winners. They were great in the American bond market. They did. They were Salomon Brothers, and they invented American bonds. Mickey Markins did it. Henry Kaufman did a huge history. Meriwether came in, and he ran on, and he ran that very well. But now they started to get, when they went to Russia, that's what killed them. They couldn't get out of that stuff. The Russians were not going to leave it. The Russians were going to do what any American bond trader would do. They will take you for every penny and not let you out till they drain you. As Salomon Brothers, Goldman Sachs do this, basically, there were those who had a lot of winners but very big losers. And I had made up good, funny names for people I knew and stories. And then there's the person who doesn't use stops.
They're too smart to use stops, Larry. They don't have to.
Yes. One of them told me that. One guy explained to me, no, it's just like we are the market. Okay? So now I have these names of people that I actually know and was there. One guy, I was renting office space for him. I watched him go broke. They had a guy working there, and the guy disappeared, leaving them with a big option position. What happened was, he calls me in and he said, Larry, what would you do in this situation? I said, I believe the first loss is the best loss. He said, thank you, Larry. Turned out he was rewarded by not selling. And I walked into my friend Bob Tomiso and I said, we're not going to be renting here much longer. It's over for this guy. He got to a minefield. What he did was he closed his eyes and walked. And he got to the other end and he didn't get blown up. So now he thinks that go to a minefield, close your eyes. That's not going to last very long. I mean, I wasn't that old. It didn't seem to me a way that I would want to go through a minefield. What I found, then you got to art trading. The people that I see lose, one is the people who are averaged out. Well, you know about Terrence O'Neill, right? I must have told you about that. He's an economist. They looked at 10,000 random accounts at a large no-commission brokerage place. And he found this extraordinary thing. He wasn't an accountant, so it really bothered him. A lot of these people sell their winners to buy more of their losers. And more than it, like 60% of them. Well, I mean, we know that from commodity trading. So look, you see, I write a book, but instead of really having a book, it's the same shit all the time. I saw two guys in the broker's office, and they wanted me to come in with them. They did not take losses. And they had a 5-year run, not taking losses. All their clients loved them.
They looked good in the moment.
Yeah, for years. I said, no. So I find the same thing that O'Neill finds. It's so simple. It's in my book. It's so simple.
We've had all this crazy stuff happen out of the blue. Maybe it's not out of the blue, whatever. But Russia's here, Ukraine's here, and a lot of volatility, a lot of movement in the last couple months. And then if we look at the commodity markets, okay. We brought up when we were talking earlier about long-term capital management. That's a story that everyone knows now. But when we look at the current moment right now, with all the market movements, the volatility, you just got to think that we've already probably had a few very large funds trading the way that you're talking about, that it's the bad way, all these winners. I think maybe they've gotten better at hiding their blowups. They don't want to be known as these stories forever, but you got to think in the last couple months, there are some major funds that have just gone poof.
Look, I'm having the last year, I made enormous amount of money for me, and without any particularly more risk. First of all the securities I had just went up anyway. So I don't have the funny. See, I thought you could do it all the time, funny stories, because I watched people do this. Like I had this one guy, I don't know why he started trading with man, but he did. He made some money in sugar. Like maybe he made $1 million, and he gave half of it back. And he decided he's going to get the money back from sugar. Why he decided that? Oh, wait, he told me sugar owed him the money. And if you want to know if somebody's going to be a loser in the markets, when they tell you that the market owes them, you can go short that guy forever.
About that example, the sugar example, this is also kind of the same with somebody who says they only trade one market. Because if they only trade one market, they're going to be in a constant state of trying to get revenge on that one market.
Yeah, Niederhofer proved that. He took on the Japanese government, and he lost. If you take on one market, and yeah, I have seen, I forget what his name, but I did it in my big coffee trade. I forget what his name is now. This guy was the greatest. If there's 3 top coffee traders in the world, he would be 2. And he's really into it. Driving home, Danny Rosenblum's limo, and Danny said to him, can't remember the guy's name, said, do you have any regrets? The guy owns 3% of Goldman Sachs. He wonder what regrets he has. He said, yeah, I would be much richer if I had gone into oil because of bigger market. I remember that very clearly because he knows how to operate. He really lives it night and day. I really couldn't go too much further. It's 3 things. It's exactly what I said in the rule.
Your book, The Rule, just for people following along.
Yeah, the rule that David Ricardo wrote.
Well, The Rule, you wrote a book, The Rule, too.
Yeah, but it was based on his rule.
That was how our conversation started. You were like, hey, I've lived this. I loved Ricardo's wisdom. And then you said, well, let's go ahead. And I remembered the conversation. You're like, okay, the name of the book, The Rule.
I will tell you, I am not an energetic. I mean, I'm not like the 4 people we used to be. I'm not frantic, but I've made a very good living. Now, not everybody can do this. I think they think too much of themselves. I was not a good athlete, not a good student, and I was dyslexic. I was not surprised that I could lose at something. I remember figuring out one night, using a deck of cards, playing Vegas solitaire, where you got 52, that if the deck you could lose, even though you go through the whole deck, even when you cheated, you could lose. And that, I said, okay, obviously part of this game is to keep your losses small, because you can't control them. You will lose. It's like an insurance company. You take too much concentrated risk, you'll get fat premium, and then that price blows up a lot of your capital.
Can I ask you a motivation question here? You're not 30 years old anymore. Look, you've got enough money. You can do what you want to do. But why are you motivated with the same mindset of a 30-year-old guy? Why not just kick back and, I don't know, sit out at the beach and drink those fruity drinks or something? Why are you motivated like you are?
Well, first of all, it's the only thing that I've really done well. But it's fun to go in and make an algorithm, and the algorithm makes you money.
By algorithm, you can mean a trend following system, other types of systems, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, the trend following system was really made. The trend following system is the surest way to make money in stocks or anything else.
I shared a story of yours recently with someone that was texting with me. They were all focused on entry. And I shared the story of you telling me about the random entry system that your firm made and that it did really well, maybe even better than the regular system, but you couldn't use it because then you would have to tell clients in the fund that you were using a random entry system that just would not compute. Maybe they would think you guys were crazy or not putting in the work or something. They would not understand.
Well, the young man who did that to me, first day he got there was Alex Raisman. We still go back to that.
Was that the first time you had seen that with Alex, that you actually went through that exercise, the first time in your career where you kind of like, wow, it even gave you a wow moment?
No, here's the truth. Peter Matthews, who had a much better self-image than I did, he said, but we're genius. Yeah, you did really great. I said, no. I said, Larry, what do you mean? I mean, we're the top fund manager. When I was there, we made about 30% of the year. Markets were good. I said, no, I can go in. Let's do it. I'll go in. Just, that's it. Random generator picks where you're going to trade. Then you flip another coin, and that flips long or short. Only thing is there's a 2% stop. That's it.
Think about what you just said. That is so, there's a lot of complexity behind it. There's a lot of depth behind it, but you reduce it to a few sentences and it sums up the entire investing world in a few sentences. Not only does it sum it up in a few sentences for the last 50 years, the last 100 years, the last 500 years, it sums it up for the next 500 years. It's this wonderful adaptive, it's a little algo. You've just spelled it out. It's amazing, that thinking that works.
I think so. Book about Tom.
Basso.
Yeah, very nice guy. He had years of losing until I assume he learned to properly position himself. Yes, I'm very interested in that. I found something like this. I understood this, from the world that I observed in Brooklyn. I mean, I once took a job. My little cousin was about 1/3 less than I was in weight. Got a job selling ice cream. So I said, come down. Larry was heavier. And then Larry goes out, and Larry doesn't like carrying ice cream. And it's hot, and my feet hurt. Bring the ice cream back. I said, I quit. But I had to wait for my cousin to go back with me. And I'm watching these kids who sell ice cream, who, let's say, came from age 14 to 22 or 23, play poker, civic card. I look at them and I say to myself, there's 10 kids, and everybody puts in $1. That's $10. So it's 10 to 1 if you win it.
You were doing the odds as a little kid.
Yeah, in my mind, right? I mean, 10 to 1. And then it was going to twist you down, but this guy, this kid either cheated or whatever, but he managed to draw an inside straight. 1 in 52 chance. And he liked to call himself the bear. And he got up and he punched his chest. He said, the bear is lucky. And I looked up and I said, God, just keep him here.
Keep the lucky bear here.
And I would say something like, hey, that was a great thing. In my mind, it said, this fucking schmuck. You always win. Even when he didn't win. I said, hey, he believed. He really believes he was looking.
You were already using some psychological gamesmanship on him to keep his ego high.
Yeah. It was the number. It was. He was enthralled with himself. It's 1 in 52 to make that flush. 1 in 52, that is very hard to get. You have 51 against you. I'm a very bad student.
You weren't really a bad student. You just didn't care about memorization games that they were teaching and boring classes and all that kind of stuff. You were always a smart guy. You just didn't care about the bullshit.
No, I tell you how unsmart I was. They decided that maybe they would send me to a trade school.
Maybe I'd be interviewing you today and you'd be like the master hammer maker or something.
So what happened was, this guy, I'm 15 or 16, right? He gives me a test. Then he stops. He says, we're going to do this another way. I'm going to read you the question, and you have to select the answer. And of course, and he wrote a report. He said, Larry is extremely smart, and he has a high degree of mathematical intelligence. Nobody would have ever written anything like that about me. But he turned out to be exactly right. You ever watch The Evangelist? Well, you're from Virginia. You must have seen these evangelists.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. Ernest Angley, Jim Baker, all these crazy guys.
Yeah, I used to love them. If I wasn't Jewish, I would go into that business.
What, to be one of them?
Oh, you can make all this money.
So hold on. So I'm imagining right now, I'm turning on the TV and you are in a white suit, touching people on the forehead and they're falling back on the stage and you're collecting the money at the same time. We should start that right now, Larry. I'll be the kind of younger minister. You'll be the older minister. They got to come in. You put their hand on their forehead. They fall back. I catch them. They give us $1,000 for each one of these. We'll make a lot of money.
There's one guy, he's got a German or a Jewish name. He needed a $2 million plane. Stuff of Jesus.
Look, there's another guy. I can't remember his name. I used to watch him, Ken something, but he's worth like $500 million. It's crazy.
I will tell you something. It's a great thing. I used to watch these guys, and I never believed in God from a very early age. I can tell you exactly when I stopped believing in God. It's very interesting. So I'm watching Victory at Sea. You don't remember Victory at Sea. It was documentaries about the Second World War and the Victory at Sea, big documentary. There was one thing where it showed the Americans and the Germans both stopping for Christmas. Couldn't have been 9 or 10. And I say to myself, wait a minute. This can't be. It can't be on both sides. Impossible. So then I go home. I go to school the next day. And I have this, one of my buddies was Joe Steiner. And another guy was Lenny Cerulli. They were my two buddies. And I told them I don't believe in God. Whereupon they both started to punch me. I told them, you can punch me. I ain't going to make God happen.
So, you know what's interesting about your story, though, is it's an interesting point. I've never heard someone say that. Okay, you got the so-called bad guys and the so-called good guys, and they're both communicating with the same God. You're a young guy, and you're looking at it and saying, well, hold on. Mathematically, logically, something's off here. You raise your hand and you say, excuse me, adults out there, can someone explain this to me? And the first thing everyone does, maybe using some of the young kids as henchmen to kind of beat you down until you just accept this, Larry. Don't ask any questions.
Yeah. One of them became a mafia button man. I don't know what happened to the other guy. And they weren't hitting hard, but they were like kids. But
the youthful would-be mafia button man was practicing on you as a kid?
No, he grew up to be
He was practicing on you when you were a kid?
Yeah. Yeah, he was a friend of mine. I mean, I don't see him much. In fact, I don't see him now at all. In fact, I have a very good friend who was really heavily, his family was like that. When he got out of jail, he said, yeah, come down. If you're going to be in Florida, I want to meet you. I'll introduce you to my new friends. I said, Michael, I will meet you anywhere if it's just you and me. I'm not going to go to that lunch. Yeah, he and I have not spoken since. Because I figure, once again, these people are watched. Why do I want to be watched?
You know what we got to do? I was thinking about this conversation today. We're not going to keep it at an hour. We're going to kind of keep it at this range right here. But what I'd like to do, and we should do this, you and I, because we talk regularly all the time, but we should do like a kind of just a half-hour check-in update on some kind of issue or topic once a month. Why not? It's fun.
Sure. Of the people that I know, I consider you have the most knowledge on this industry. I know that somewhere, you wouldn't say where, you have your money working this way. You don't have to tell me who or what, but I know that.
All I'll say is that when you're in this enough, your whole life becomes this way of thinking. You don't worry about trying things as long as they're calculated, taking certain risks. The whole thing of life, you could have very well likely have had the same strategies early in your life, and maybe you would have made 50% less money or 75% less money. That still would have been a huge amount of money. There's always a certain amount of, in reaching these astronomical heights, there's always a little bit, there's more than a little, there's always some luck involved. So it's like having the good strategy, having the good process, knowing how the world works, and putting yourself in a position to be there to get a big hit, a big home run. You even said this on this conversation, but that's what you're still motivated by. You're kind of like, well, why not? I'm still alive. Let me keep taking swings. Maybe I'll hit another home run. Why not?
Well, I have this year. And I've also noticed if you have half a brain, volatility is your friend.
Well, I've got a lot of volatility right now.
And that's why I, in a year, just doing shit. What a fun. I've no longer made. I'm just happy to be. I quit it. And I took a lot of my money out, but I kept some money in. Didn't make an enormous amount of money. So like last month, and what I still have there went up 30%. I have, and you have, a positive view. The people we see basically are all winners. Otherwise, you wouldn't interview in anything. You live in a world of people who are successful. And I'm not only talking about trading. You like stories, like you love the donut guy and how he did it.
He was great. You're talking about the Dunkin' Donuts guy. He was great, right?
Yeah. Personally, that's the thing that I think makes America great. I will tell you, the older I get, Michael, the less time or faith I have in my government.
In reality, though, most of America's success really starts at the individual level. Yes, at certain points in history, America galvanized to do certain things, build highways, get involved in some good wars, a lot of bad wars. Maybe there's no good wars. At the root level, it's the individual. You bring up the, quote, donut guy, the Dunkin' Donuts guy, and it's like his father getting started, then the son taking it over and building it into a massive operation. That wasn't the government. That was just a father and a son and an idea, and they persevered. And that's just a great story. We don't hear enough of those stories.
I tried to get the people at Aspen Institute. I was willing to back a seminar of 10 Black businessmen who were not in the entertainment business or sports. And I thought that would be a great thing.
To shake up people's understanding of what they think.
Yeah. For instance, all right, you know the rule, I know the rule. Now, I will tell you, and tell me if I'm wrong, you know all these people's records. You might not know them real well, but you know their records. You've been studying them for years. That rule, David Ricardo's rule, every one of them uses that rule. Would you say that's right or wrong?
Yeah, of course. Let's say you're a brand new person. You don't know anything about investing. You kind of stumble into some trend following world and you're like, okay, well, this guy was in London and this guy was in New York and this guy was in Southern California and they don't know each other. And they're all, quote, trading and they're trend following traders. They've got this rule about taking a loss, having a stop. It seems so simple. I think a lot of people just can't imagine that there's this consistency, that these people that developed and existed independent of each other, which is, I find, one of the most amazing things, is this real independence of each other. I mean, I've had a bunch of people on where I've really pressed them, well-known names, and I'll say, well, did you read about Donchian or something? Well, not really. I kind of found out about that later. I was just doing my own thing. Fascinating that so many people, almost in this trading evolutionary process, end up coming to the same conclusion. What you keep saying, the rule, David Ricardo's rule, your book, the rule. It's amazing.
But it sums it up in like a sentence. I think a lot of times inventions come at a certain time in history. The telephone, it's in the air. There's the means to do it. You said another thing. When you put your mind this way and you know exactly what you can lose, you don't really have to know much other shit and what that loss would do to you. That's that thing. So you follow the trend. I found a guy who basically creates advertising for lawyers to get money to fund these big cases. The great thing about this is cool. If you start a business doing that, it's an ordinary loss. And mostly you can make 10 to 15% a year, but you get an ordinary loss. So I'm just giving this guy $600,000 because I'm going to be in that business because I know I'm always going to have winners. Not every day, anything like that. But these losses, that means I get to carry forward and I come out with money at the end. If I come out with 5 or 10 and I deferred my taxes for a year or 5 years, that's very cool to me. I was thinking of moving to Puerto Rico. I don't think I'm going to do that because you can only be back in the States.
We know a lot of people that have done that. I've only been there one time. I'm a pretty good judge of being at a place one time and saying to myself, yeah, I want to go back. My one time in Puerto Rico, I was like, well, I don't want to go back.
Yeah, well, that's why they get the tax. They have to have the tax rate. Otherwise, who would want to go back to an island that has a hurricane every year? But it's very funny. Puerto Ricans have done extremely well in America.
It's not a knock, but it's just one of those things where people have to go experience assorted Caribbean islands, decide if it's for them. I'll save my opinion about why I'm not a big fan. Hint, I don't like violence. There you go.
By the way, if you find any contradictions to what I say, tell me. You told me about a guy who liked to surf, made a system up, boom, and he had it run and he surfs.
That story is coming. It's going to be in a book, and the podcast has already been recorded.
Okay, can you tell me one thing? How long was this guy at it?
I think I mentioned it before. I'm surprised he didn't go to a lot of the events and stuff like that. He started in the 70s.
Yeah, okay. So my question, you looked at his track record, right?
Yeah.
What was his average return?
I don't recall off the top of my head, but his numbers looked like the numbers you would expect from a long-time trend-following trader going back to the 70s. Same kind of headspace as to so many of the names and across my books, your names, etc. So it's the same kind of stuff. His name was not a secret to me. I had known his name. I had seen it in all back, the Stark Report and all that kind of stuff. It was all in there. I just didn't ever have a chance to connect with him.
And how did you connect with him?
I asked a friend who I thought would know him, and that friend knew him, gave me an email address, and usually that's all I have to do interviews on this podcast is an email address. I mean, that's how I got Daniel Kahneman to appear. I just emailed him. No intermediary or anything, just Mike sending an email. And generally, if you send an email to an interesting person, an accomplished person, and I'm doing this podcast, I say, look, I'd like to have you on my podcast. I'd love to talk to you. Here's who I've had on prior. Most people say yes.
I was going to put this down, but it's really true. I only have one podcast thing that I ever listen to. I never listened to Joe Rogan. I mean, I don't have the time. My single source of podcasting is you.
Rogan's great, and a lot of podcasts are great, but I think the difference, I didn't plan this, but I think the difference for what I do versus a Rogan or a Tim Ferriss, Rogan and Tim Ferriss will have on very interesting people that maybe they were in the sports world or some kind of UFC fighting or something like that. Or Tim might have some really different type guests on. But what I end up having is traders and academics that have really defined niche worlds. There's so much information you can find from traders and these academics that might have nothing to do with trading. But if I have somebody on who's dedicated their life to this like narrow subject area, whether people like academics or not, there's always useful information to come from those people. That's why this podcast probably appeals to someone like you, because ultimately you love to read books. You listen to my podcast, you might like an episode, you buy a book. There you go. Boom.
Oh, yeah, they must love you. The publishers must love you. At least it probably double by what's on that broadcast. For instance, you had this one about the companies that survive. I still have it. I mean, it shows you. And a lot of the companies that survived are extremely like trend following. I mean, I still have that Jeff Bezos stuff.
I get pitched a lot of different guests, and I turn down a lot of guests these days because a lot of stuff, even if it's a name individual, I'll like look at the book, I'll look at the copy. It's just already been done. There's nothing novel there. There's nothing interesting. And I sometimes want to tell some of the publishers and some of the PR people and these authors, who's advising you? This topic's been done a million times. Why are you doing this? It's not even interesting. If the individual themselves is really interesting and they've done all kinds of stuff in their life and they happen to put out a book about motivation or whatever, okay, that's different. But so many people that don't appear to be known yet are just writing on the exact same topics. I don't understand it. I can't get interested.
Well, it interests me because I like things that function well.
I'm talking about the ones that I don't have on, the ones that I turn down.
Tell me a rough, so that guy's been making more than 20% a year.
I don't recall the numbers off the top of my head, but I'm surprised you didn't know this guy.
You made a comment once at Traders Gallery, Money Managers. And you said, it's really funny, these guys don't want to know each other.
I did share that story with you where I introduced two key players. One of them was a billionaire. The other guy was pretty successful, and they didn't know each other, and I was the conduit.
Right. Did they hit it off?
I don't know. I can't keep track of that stuff. Come on, Larry. I'm in Saigon. I'm off the grid, man.
You are the grid. At least on my thing. But if you ever come to what that is, because I'm fascinated, I can't tell you how fascinating. You ask why I was brought up in a family that they believed in work, hard work. Yeah, hard work to me always seems stupid. Smart work, I really had appreciation for. The fact that so much is made by such simple shit in anything, it's like judo. If you put your foot behind somebody else's, he's going down. A 120-pound girl could take down a 200-pound guy. If she hits him in the back of the leg, he'll go down because he'll lose balance. All right, listen, it was fun talking to you.
I'm going to name this episode Simple Shit Works.
But it does.
Larry, I'll let you run. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, take it easy. Bye.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.